Earlier this week, we looked at every manufacturer, found their best coaster, and ranked them from worst to best. Basically, an all-star lineup, the best of the best. Today, let's flip that around. For every crown jewel or magnum opus, there's the red-headed stepchild of the bunch. The project these manufacturers either aren't proud of or haven't aged well. This is every manufacturer's worst coaster, ranked from best to worst. I want to shout out Loot Coasters once again for this video idea. Thanks for suggesting this two-part series. It was a lot of fun to research and put together. I'm going to start with the best of the worst and work my way down to the worst of the worst. Number 31, RMC, Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. This may be an unpopular opinion. You have the weaker hybrids like New Texas Giant, Joker, and Twisted Cyclone. But as of right now, I'm just not that into Jersey Devil. And after riding Wonder Woman a few times at Magic Mountain, I don't think it's that great either. Drawn out elements, not much whip, over-the-shoulder restraints. All around, kinda disappointing. Even when I get back on Jersey Devil this year, I bet it still will be my weakest RMC. But that's okay, that's why it's the best of the worst. RMC has strong competition and they don't make bad rides. Number 30, the Gravity Group, Kentucky Flyer, Kentucky Kingdom. They've made a bunch of high-end extreme wooden coasters, but they've also cornered the market for the family woodies. I've ridden a few of those and they're enjoyable. The one that left me the most underwhelmed was Kentucky Flyer. Not a bad ride at all, but it was the most forceless. Still, a really good ride for families and something Kentucky Kingdom really needed. Number 29, Premier Rides, Flight of Fear at King's Dominion and Kings Island. Premier is known for their launch coasters. All their rides run pretty smooth, so there's not much to whine about. I've never been a big fan of Flight of Fear. These indoor spaghetti bowl coasters, getting up to 54 miles an hour and flipping around 4 times. I actually much prefer the outdoor version of these rides, weaving around all the track and supports around you. There's nothing wrong with Flight of Fear, just my least favorite Premier. Number 28, Morgan, Wild Thing at Valley Fair. They only have 9 coasters to their name, and most of them stand over 200 feet. They have 3 similar hypers in the Cedar Fair chain, Steel Force, Mamba, and Wild Thing. Of these 3, I think Wild Thing was the weakest. 196-foot drop, over a mile of track, and 74 miles an hour. That speed is where the ride excels, but that's as far as it goes. It's void of any airtime, especially on the return trip. Those trims hitting way too hard. So this ride's got potential, but it leaves you wanting more. Number 27, PTC, Thunderhawk at Dorney Park. PTC has been around for over 100 years. They have 127 coasters to their name. 24 are still around, and up to this year, it was going to be Wildcat at Lake Compounds. That got retracked, and apparently it's good again. So let's go for a ride that really did nothing for me, Thunderhawk. It's 100 years old now, 65-foot drop, 45 miles an hour, over 2,700 feet of track. Last time I rode it in 2018, it was kind of a snooze fest, but I'm looking forward to giving it another shot this year. Number 26, Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I don't like Goliath. I think it wastes a lot of potential, but for the general public, the ride is fine, so it's low on the list. 255-foot drop, 85 miles an hour, 4,500 feet of track, and a gray out helix at the end. Giovanola only has 3 coasters, so there's barely any separation from the top and bottom. In fact, the top of their list is Titan, and that's a near clone of Goliath. Number 25, Schwarzkopf, Super Duper Looper at Hershey Park. Schwarzkopf was all about the looping coasters in the 70s and 80s. A lot of them were portable, built on flat plots of land, and some of them were built into their terrain. Super Duper Looper is considered the revolution of the East, built into the hillside, just one loop. A pretty big deal in 1977, but 47 years later hasn't really stood the test of time. A lot of old Schwarzkopfs are intense and the forces have held up over the years, but this is just a loop and a bunch of meandering. Number 24, Zierer, Jaguar at Knott's Berry Farm. Zierer has almost 200 coasters to their name. Most of them are pretty small. Jaguar is one of their sprawling Tivoli coasters, using 2 lifts, no real big drop. I guess the max drop is 45 feet on this very gradual hill, and it almost acts like a monorail, giving you a tour of the Fiesta Village section of the park, but not doing much in terms of coaster things. A lot of straight track, and something you'd see in Roller Coaster Tycoon when you're out of space. Number 23, Mauer, Wild Mouse at Dorney Park. This is a very basic Wild Mouse, similar to the ones that Mach Rides makes, and I actually enjoyed the Mauer Mouse at Lagoon when I went in 2019. This one didn't leave an impression, and since there aren't any egregiously bad Mauers out there, I guess I'll go with the one at Dorney. Number 22, ENF Myler, Big Timber Log Ride at Enchanted Forest. This is so barely a coaster. Some enthusiasts actually break from RCDB and declare this not a coaster, it's a log flume. I get that, but there is clearly a coaster section before the final drop, so I don't make the rules. That's a coaster. It's as good as a log flume coaster can be. I didn't like how it managed to soak me on the pre-drop and the main drop, but I hate water. That's a me problem. Number 21. PAX, roller coaster at Gorky Park in Russia. I had to dig deep for this one. This was a tiny portable looking looping coaster, kinda similar to those janky Pinfari loopers, and this went defunct about 20 years ago, so you can go ahead and cancel your trip to Moscow. Number 20. Jinma, forest flying mouse at Guangzhou Zoological Garden in China. Jinma may be the company that rips other manufacturers' designs, but a lot of them look modern and good. This one looks janky. You sit in these knockoff Mickey Mouse cars, ride on that track that looks like it was bent by hand, and it just looks like one of those rides where you hang on and wait for it to be over. Number 19. Pinfari, Dinosaur Valley at Wicksteed Park in the UK. Most Pinfaris are portable, but they have some decent drops and nice compact layouts. This one is just full of small shallow drops and turns, and for some reason, it's got over-the-shoulder restraints. That's just bizarre and makes the ride that much less desirable. Number 18. Gerstlauer, Hurricane at Belantis. On paper, this custom German Eurofighter looks great. 105 feet tall, 1800 feet of track, 5 inversions, and the only Cobra roll in a Eurofighter. This has the same 6-person cars as Daredevil Dive, but this has over-the-shoulder restraints and apparently it's insanely rough. I haven't ridden it, I don't know, but that's what I've heard and I believe them. Gerstlauer seem to be either butter smooth or jarringly rough. Not much middle ground there. Number 17. Aerodynamics, Anaconda at King's Dominion. I know, this ride has its fans, and yes, I admit the first half is intense. It's the second half that meanders around, jerks you side to side, and that's the reason it became my daughter's number 200 favorite coaster before she even had 200 coasters.
It doesn't even make it on my top 200. I don't even have 200 coasters.
There's a few questionable arrows out there, but this design and that roughness do not make for a good combination. Number 16. B&M, Firebird at Six Flags America. This is the original B&M, a small-scale B&M stand-up turned floorless, and it was the last B&M in America I had not ridden up till 2021. When I got off, I knew it was worse than Vortex at Carowinds. This one was so jerky side to side. I actually got head and neck banging, which is very unusual for a B&M. I think this is long past its expiration date, but it's at Six Flags America, so they'll hang on as long as they can. Number 15. Hopkins Dragon at Adventureland. In the last video, I said the 7 Hopkins coasters didn't really look good or bad, but I've heard some bad things about Dragon. I just missed this one. It was still in pieces when I went to the park in 2021, but it gave its last ride in 2019. 90 feet tall, 85 foot drop, 2 loops, a twister finale, and apparently it was just stupid rough. That's weird. The Hopkins coasters I've ridden are a bit janky but not really rough. But maybe that's why those are still around and this is gone. Number 14. Vegan, Hummel Brummel at Schwaben Park in Germany. This company is known for their mountain coasters, but this one is just weird. It's a family suspended coaster using a powered track, mostly straight track and drawn out turns, using some kind of green cover themed to a bee. I guess it fits being next to Wilda Hilda, the crazy chicken rollerball coaster. Number 13. SNS, Timberhawk Ride of Prey at Wild Waves. SNS doesn't make a lot of bad coasters. You may not like the free spins. Hellcat can be very rough when it's not freshly retracked. All of their coasters were built in the 21st century, so I'll go with one of the most boring wooden coasters I've ever ridden. 75 feet tall, 2,600 feet of track, and pretty smooth, albeit forceless. It almost seems impossibly forceless, like they tried as hard as they could to avoid any force whatsoever. Number 12. The Din Corporation, Hercules at Dorney Park. It's hard to judge these coasters, they changed so much over time. I rode Raging Wolf Bobs and Mean Streak, and even though they weren't good, they weren't the worst. I heard nothing but bad things about Hercules, even nicknamed Hurt Your Knees. And even with that awesome 151 foot drop and turn over the lake, I guess it was too painful to really enjoy. Number 11. Mock Rides, Coast Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. It's a basic large park wild mouse. They have the same thing at King's Dominion and Legoland California and a whole bunch of other parks. But over the years, this has gotten progressively worse. I can't think of a wild mouse that runs slower than this. It's so unbelievably trimmed. And of course, it has the shin guards, those added after an accident a couple years after it opened. Slow, uncomfortable ride, and I wish they'd just take it out and put something new here. Number 10. Great Coasters International, Roar at Six Flags America. This is an old school GCI twister, opening in 1998, and it looks good on paper. 85 foot drop, almost 3,500 feet of track, nothing straight, everything is curved. When I last rode this, it had next to no force and gave me a splitting headache. So unless something changes this year, it's one of my least favorite wooden coasters and the worst GCI that I know of. Number 9. RCCA, Coaster Express at Parque Warner Madrid. I could have picked just about any RCCA and could have been safe, so I had to try and figure out which one's the worst of the worst. I may be wrong, but this one seems to be the most hated. It's got the size, 120 feet tall, almost 4,600 feet long, 2 enormous helices, but in typical RCCA fashion, it's just nothing but pain. Number 8. Voma Garix at Park Asterix. This MK1200 model opened in 1989, and it's chock full of interesting elements. It includes both a butterfly and a batwing. I actually really like this layout, but ever since I got into the coaster world, all I hear from my European friends is how bad this coaster is. It's old school Voma, so I get it. Their sit-down loopers are some of the most brutal coasters ever built, and just the word Garix sends chills down enthusiast spines. Number 7. Skyline Harley Quinn Crazy Coaster at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. As bad as this was, it's crazy is only number 7. This managed to be both boring and weirdly rough, going around those 2 dive loops over and over again, using single rail RMC track, and for some reason, it was like riding over 50 potholes all at once. I'm glad I wrote it. It only lasted 2 years and was barely open during that time, but what a bad coaster. Number 6. Chance Rides Swiss Toboggan at Little America. If your coaster gives me a sore neck for a whole week after riding, you should at least land in the top 5, but this is only number 6. I'm feeling charitable today. This is an old model going back to the 60s, only one left in America, and lucky us, we still got the one in Wisconsin. Rise up a 45-foot vertical lift, spiral down to the bottom, and get your head launched into the roof. I don't say this too often, but never ever again. Number 5. SBF Visa Viking roller coaster at Energylandia. Now that more enthusiasts are making it to Poland, we get to hear about the good and bad rides at this European superpark. Viking roller coaster is universally despised. It's a spinning wild mouse, so that's not great to begin with. But this has over-the-shoulder restraints, and that's just inexcusable. Cannibal has a lap bar. This has a horse collar. Make it make sense. Number 4. Togo Windjammer Surf Racers at Knott's Berry Farm. This coaster was as bad as it was unreliable. Maybe the coaster gods were trying to do us a favor by causing it to break down in 3-mile-an-hour winds. Just move on and spare yourself the pain. This looping mouse coaster just had that one loop and then meandered around, having those humongous over-the-shoulder restraints. Add in bad Togo transitions and you have one disaster of a ride. Number 3. Custom Coasters International Pegasus at Mount Olympus. After Mount Olympus bought Cyclops, they figured, why not go back to CCI for a family wooden coaster? Bad idea. This layout is awful. A bunch of small shallow dips to start, ending with some moderate-sized hills to get back to the station, and then the worst transition of all time just to cap off a terrible ride. It's a family coaster that kids, or adults for that matter, should come nowhere near. Number 2. Zamura Time Warp at Canada's Wonderland. We saw Voma try their hand at a flying coaster and it worked out well. We saw B&M try it and it worked out great, but Zamura's portable version turned out to be a mess. This was my first Volare model, or Volare, whatever's the right way to say it, and my one and only ride, I was in full defensive mode. My head was being smashed so hard against the ear pads, and turns out they don't even need the pads. The one at Coney Island doesn't have it and it's so much better. Totally unnecessary pain. Number 1. Intin Green Lantern First Flight at Six Flags Magic Mountain. For a long time, I said this was the worst coaster ever, but others rode this Zaxspin model overseas and said it was good there. So I go to Sweden and ride insane at Grönlund, and it makes me realize this model is just a big fat dud. It's slow and pointless in the first half, and then the second half tries to rip you in half, and not in a good way. Definitely a torturous way. The one at Magic Mountain was given extra weight in the trains that made it flip less, and that caused the ride to be more painful. Even if you don't agree with Green Lantern here, I think Intin still takes the number 1 spot because of another Magic Mountain coaster, Flashback. This had one of the worst designs ever, built more to fit on a small plot of land and be a good ride. Snappy transitions with over-the-shoulder restraints guaranteeing massive headbanging. Intin is a lot of people's number 1 coaster manufacturer, but they have some really awful coasters in their catalog. That's a wrap on every manufacturer's worst coasters ranked up. Let me know where you agree or disagree. If you would have picked a different coaster, or if you would have changed the order here, sound off in the comments below. If you want to see the best coasters from all these manufacturers ranked up, click the card above or in my end screen. Before you go, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you also happen to love baseball. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.